Hello and welcome to Bonus. Today, it is far too hot to be recording anything, but here I am anyway. It is a sweltering 28 degrees here in Manchester, which, for my American chums, that's 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And I know what you're thinking, those who live in hotter parts of the world. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that's not very hot at all. That's fine. I wish it was that temperature. Well, you see, here in Britain, we are ill-equipped to deal with these temperatures because, well, we haven't invented air conditioning yet, you see, so the best thing I can do is open a window and hope that an anemic breeze carries all of this heat away, which of course it doesn't. To be fair, it's actually not that bad. It's quite nice out, it's sunny, and as long as I don't have to do anything, it's fine. But unfortunately, bonus counts as doing something, so grumble, grumble. Anyway, for the gameplay this week, in case you're wondering, I have some Grid Autosport, which I recorded at a ratio of 16:10, because that's what my monitors are. You see, normally when I record for a video, I record at 1080p, 16:9, and I have to deal with black bars on the top and bottom. But this time, it's you with the black bars. Anyway, let's get on with the questions. Let's see what you've left for me this week. James Flintham says, who is your favourite author? What style of books do you read? And are you a bookworm? I don't get to read as often as I'd like. Well, I suppose I could make time to read, but generally if I have spare time, I guess I'd rather play a video game. But I do like to read occasionally, and I recently bought 10 Powers on Stranger Tides for the piracy video, just, to get sort of a thematic insight into it. So I do plan on reading that at some point. As a general rule of thumb, I think I prefer science fiction and thriller books, generally speaking. Favourite authors? I've been known to read a Stephen King novel, and dare I say I've read a few Crichton books in my time. And Dean Koontz as well, he's pretty good. Otherwise, like I say, science fiction, I do quite like science fiction. I'm a big fan of short stories because you can read those, like in an hour or half an hour even, which is, that's good. I read Flowers for Algernon pretty recently, and that was good. I liked that. I also quite like Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov. I think they've both had collections of short stories, and I like those. I think I've read some of the longer stuff as well. These days, I do tend to find myself reading non-fiction more often than fiction, though. I've got quite a few reference books on firearms, and I've got some on video games as well. I actually quite like looking through those. I've got one called 1001 Video Games You Must Play Before You Die. And it's a bit of a rubbishy book. Some of the games featured are questionable, but I like the topic anyway. I also quite enjoyed The Final Hours of Titanfall by Jeff Keighley. That was an ebook that detailed the tortuous and difficult time that the developers, Respawn, had producing Titanfall, which, is pretty niche interest, but I found it fascinating. I read Dan Amrich's book as well, Critical Path, it's basically pretty much a complete guide to how to be a games reviewer. And I read that, and it was brilliant, fascinating, and a really sort of good insight into the industry, and I realised that I don't want to be a games reviewer. So yeah, I like books. I wouldn't consider myself a bookworm though, but that's only because there's more stimulating things on offer, Curse you, internet, you've ruined everything. Mellow the Panda says, hey Stu, have you ever played Dota/Dota 2, and do you think esports should be considered real sports? I think they should, as by definition, a sport is not necessarily physical, and chess is considered a sport too, so why not esports? I have played Dota 2, but only very, very briefly. MOBAs are not something that hugely interest me. It's difficult to ignore their popularity, but, I think some people would agree with me, they don't see the appeal or whatever. And to be perfectly honest, I've never really been hugely interested in purely multiplayer games. I've always preferred single player, and I think COD is definitely the exception, really. As for its consideration as a sport, this reminds me of whether certain games are considered games at all. That is to say, you'll probably always find someone who disagrees with you. I think the bottom line is, I think if you consider Dota 2 a sport, then it's considered a sport. It might only be you that thinks that, but that's all that matters, right? I think the fact that the International was shown on, I think it was ESPN, I think the fact that it's coming up on places like that probably gives indication that there is a wider acceptance of it as a sport. So, there's that. But as far as Olympic recognition of Dota 2, I don't know about that so much, because, well, the thing about video games is they tend to be ephemeral, they tend to be quite temporary. I'm not sure how many people will be playing Dota 2 in 25 years' time, for instance. Maybe it'll be Dota 5. Maybe by then it will be. But chess is one of those games that's been played for, hundreds of years. So it's easy to see why that might have recognition from an official body. But video games, I don't know. I think maybe they need to... maybe if you've got a history of 50 years of playing Dota, or, its derivatives, maybe it could be considered. But anyway, I wouldn't worry too much about official recognition. I mean, as long as you can watch it and you enjoy it, and what more do you need? Real Olymp says, what was your favourite subject in school? Probably one of the sciences, I'd reckon. Probably physics, I'd say. Otherwise, I don't know, it wasn't really the subject that made much of a difference to how much I enjoyed a class. It was probably more who I was sat next to and who the teacher was. The actual learning part, the lesson, well, that was just a distraction. Captain Killfeed says, do you ever eat at your desk? I suppose I do, yeah, pretty often. My house isn't spectacularly large, so we don't actually have a dedicated dining room. And the fact that me and the wife, we eat at different times quite often, and we eat different things. I mean, sometimes I'll cook for her, I cook for her quite often, but just not every meal. Mifune41 says, how does your unconventional sleep schedule affect your relationship? Are there days where you don't really talk to your wife because of sleep/work schedules? Was she always okay with it, assuming she is now? It goes both ways. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's less good. But, it works out. I'm pretty flexible with regards to my work. I can work whenever I'm able, so I tend to wait until she goes to bed before I get down to writing or, other serious focused tasks. So the work fits around, the time that we can spend together. Otherwise, sometimes it's good, I mean, it's nice to share a bed, but sometimes it's nicer to have an entire bed to yourself. Otherwise, I do have some degree of control over when I sleep. I can bend it to fit social engagements, so it's not generally a problem, but, sometimes there can be friction if I'm asleep when she needs me to be awake. But whatever, she can deal with it, I can't control when I'm tired and when I'm not. It's a sleep disorder after all. Timmerlange says, do you believe in God, Stu? Oh, the big question. Well, it depends on how you interpret the question, really, doesn't it? If you're asking me, Stu, do you believe in the existence of a physical, supernatural being of any ilk? I would say to you, absolutely not. I mean, I'm not here to tell you what to believe, but you'd think if there was a physical god who wanted to be worshipped, who had influence in the real world, you'd think he'd maybe have a little bit more evidence for his own existence than some book that was supposedly written by men interpreting the very word of God. You'd think there'd be something more solid than that, wouldn't you? Anyway, as to another interpretation of the question, do you believe in God as a metaphorical entity? Maybe as some sort of placeholder construct that takes the place of human ignorance of how the universe came to be? Then sure, why not? Go nuts! There's a big gaping hole in our understanding where science hasn't quite reached. And if you want to paint a picture of a man with a little beard in there, then yeah, fine. Why not? Why not? I mean, you're probably wrong. But that's the thing about metaphors, they don't represent reality, they just are an abstraction of reality. I'm not here to preach anything, I don't want to change what you believe, but it should be pretty obvious I'm not a subscriber of any major religion. I was raised as a Christian, I went to a Christian primary school. We sang hymns, we recited prayers, but the Anglican Church is quite a cynical one when it comes to questions of belief. It's very muted, it's really more of a social club than any sort of belief system these days. LSC97 says, hey Stu, since you're doing a brief history of piracy and possibly graphics, have you thought about doing a brief history of censorship? The topic of censorship's come up in a couple of videos I've done, the Gore one probably most notably. However, I'm not sure if the brief history format would work particularly well for that. If I were to do a video on censorship, I'd probably approach it in the same way that I'd approach a special, like the Easter egg special. So I'd break it up by topic rather than by chronology. Otherwise, it might just turn into a list of games that were censored, which, well, it has merits, but I think it could be done better. And there'd be a lot of me saying, and then Australia censored this, and then Australia banned this, and then the Germans didn't like this. So yeah, I'd probably do it topically, and I don't know, I mean, there would be a lot of work involved in that. It's a possibility in the future, though. Next up in the brief history is a brief history of graphics. I think that's pretty much a shoo-in, and I think that one will work quite well, because there's a definite chronology to graphics. I can carve up history into distinct segments. And I think for the Brief History series to really work, I need to be able to do that. It was about halfway through producing the piracy video that I started to realise that there isn't really a huge chronology to the theme of pirate games. There are certainly some trends, there are certainly flurries of pirate games that came along, like all of the piracy strategy ones on the PC that came in the late 90s, or the Monkey Island games, which certainly have had a pretty good level of influence. But there's no real progression through time, so it was probably less suited. So I'm going to be less likely to do anything thematic for a Brief History. So Brief History of Cyberpunk, probably out. That's not to say I won't do a Cyberpunk special, but it probably won't be a chronological one. One thing I might try is a genre Brief History. I might do a Brief History of driving games after the graphics, just to see how well that works. Because at least within the consistent genre there is a certain development. We can see the transition, certainly with the graphics of driving games. So yeah, it remains to be seen precisely how well it can be done, and I might break chronology if I can lump topics together. But anyway, that's for future me to worry about. What is up, Mon? Says Stu, what are your thoughts on communism? Well, as an ideology, it's pretty noble. But there is a huge chasm between the theory behind an ideology and the practical application. And I'm not sure if there are any communist states, either past or present, that I'd really like to live in. Or live under, as I should say. So yeah, noble idea, B-, needs some work. As far as post-capitalist society is concerned, I quite like the idea of a basic income. There was talks of Switzerland introducing such a thing, but again, until it's implemented, you don't know how it's going to pan out. James Burton says, what is your experience with rum? Well, I like a mojito, and I'm not too shy of cocktails that contain rum, but it's not exactly something I drink regularly. It's not a go-to drink. Once upon a time, I drank a whole bottle of Captain Morgan, 70 centilitres, or thereabouts. It was on offer in the Students' Union, 50 pence a shot, and I was drinking quadruples, and somehow I managed to get through an entire bottle of it. Anyway, long story short, it was a while before I drank dark rum after that. Canister Bomb Entertainment says, Stu, unlimited beef jerky, unlimited custom beer, or any game for free for life. Which one do you choose? Is it possible to die of beef poisoning? Like, not poisoned beef, but like if you've just eaten too much beef. Your body just shuts down and says, that's it, I'm dead, no more beef. Because I'd be afraid of that if I had unlimited beef jerky. So, I don't know, I'd probably go for any game for free for life. Because I like games, for one, and it would make my job much easier. And I figure, with the money that I save from those games, let's say I buy a couple of games a month and I spend maybe 50 to, well, I suppose up to 80 quid if I'm buying full price titles, then I could just spend that money on beer and beef jerky, and have a moderate amount of both, and not die from beef poisoning. Gazetto Boondog says, Hey Stu, have you ever watched Game of Thrones? If no is the answer, why not? I have watched Game of Thrones. I've got the first season on Blu-ray. I've watched 3 episodes. But, I don't know. I'm not really big on serialised drama. I'm not really big on drama full stop, if I'm honest. I mean, I like Game of Thrones. It's nice. It's entertaining. It's exciting. But I guess I get kind of bored when I'm just sat down watching something. I feel understimulated. Karl Marx says, Stu, what are your political views? Socially left, fiscally right, overall centrist, with a heavy dose of laissez-faire. Normally, when it comes to voting, I vote for the guy who I think is least likely to win. Unless they're a Nazi, in which case I don't vote for them. Claymister says, which was the first GTA game you played? It was the very first one, in fact. When was 1997, I think that was released, which would have made me 15 years old. And yes, the game was rated 18 in the UK. What we had to do is we had to get our oldest looking friend to buy it. And we only had enough money for 1 copy, so we had to share as well. Take turns playing it. But still, fun times, fun times. I think I've bought every single Grand Theft Auto game since then. And for the longest time, I only ever played them on PC. I mean, I got GTA 2 for the PC, all of the GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas, all of those for the PC. And that was really tempting. I was so tempted to get a PS2, because they had about a year of exclusivity. before it finally came out for the PC. So yeah, it was tempting. And then GTA 4 I got for my Xbox 360. I was tempted over to the peasant side, as is the fashion to say today. Matt Cook says, "Hey Stu, do you know if your older videos are still doing well? Every so often I find that I go back and watch your Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops guides." Oh yeah, I mean a huge proportion of my views come from old videos these days. They are very much propping up my channel. So, you look after your videos, you make good videos, and in the long term, they'll look after you. One of the things that I like to do is make videos that are not only relevant and entertaining today, but also for the future. And admittedly, the weapon guides aren't that useful, at least not, from the gameplay tip perspective. They are at least, if you want to remember what it was like using the ACR in Modern Warfare 2, or whatever your favourite gun was, then there's this little encapsulated slice of gameplay and how the gun felt and performed. Yeah, it's nice, and people go back, I think, for a bit of a nostalgia hit. And there are quite a few people who watch them. In fact, the ACR video for Modern Warfare 2 gets about 7,000 views a month. But when you consider that I've got, 42 videos in that series alone, it all adds up. I mean, it really does. So I like having older videos, and this is why I when I look at my stats and I see a video that does well, even though it's an old video, I think, well, I should do more like that. So I suppose the great hope is for, in a few years' time to maybe have like a solid library of videos that turn over enough views to insulate me from any potential harm. And I wouldn't like to rely on them forever, but any insulation at all is good in this industry. Elephant FAL says, "Would you ever make a video about the XCOM series?" It's pretty likely. If I ever start doing Retro Ahoy again, which I do plan on doing, then I really should make the XCOM series a priority, because it is one of my favourite games. It's certainly one that I enjoyed a huge amount back in the day, and I like the remake today. In fact, I was thinking for the relaunch of Retro Ahoy, I might just tackle my favourite games of all time straight away, just in case it doesn't work and I never revisit Retro Ahoy ever again. I'd like to get a few games done. I think Half-Life is one of them. I think XCOM could be there. And Civilization, that's another favourite of mine. I'm not sure precisely how I'm going to structure the relaunch of Retro Ahoy, but it is going to be on my main channel, just for, well, mostly due to the fact that the search rankings on that channel are much better, and I'd be an idiot to put it anywhere else. So I'm probably going to re-upload all of the old episodes just to get them on the same channel, in kind of the lead-up to new episodes. So I've got 9 old episodes, and I might do, I don't know, between 3 and 6 new episodes. And I was thinking I might open one of those episodes up to viewer request. So yeah, maybe 3 episodes, maybe something popular, something obscure, and something that you guys choose. I think maybe Half-Life for the popular choice. I'd like to talk about Half-Life. For the obscure choices, I like quite a few obscure games. Like Uridium 2, Hired Guns, Z-Wolf, oh man, WizKid. WizKid was brilliant. Those are all cracking games, and I kind of feel like they don't get the recognition that they maybe deserve. So I can tell you now, I mean, the view counts are going to be less spectacular for obscure games, but there's a personal value there, and, sometimes that's more valuable. Speaking of obscure Amiga games, I've actually got an idea for a special, which I don't know if I'm going to do or not, but I would quite like to do. The rough title, what have I got written down? I have got Doomed, FPS and the Last Days of the Amiga. That's kind of the idea there. So the Amiga was a brilliant system, but its heyday was sort of between 1987 and 1991-92. After that, it was kind of losing out to the more powerful PCs that were coming out. Because, well, Commodore had gone bankrupt and there wasn't any new hardware. And so while PCs were getting more powerful, Amigas kind of stayed the same. Which was kind of a kicker because Doom came out in 1993, and Doom was hugely popular. Everybody wanted to play Doom and everything wanted to be Doom. It was truly an era of, well, they called them Doom clones back then, but they're now what we would call an FPS. So with the Amiga, what you had was some pretty severely limited hardware, but a large pool of talented programmers who wanted to bring Doom to their favourite hardware. So there are a whole host of Doom clones that came out for the Amiga, most of which have been forgotten. But not by me. I was a big fan of the genre, I was a big fan of the Amiga, so it's kind of my specialist subject, and I'd quite like to talk about it. I'm not sure if this video would have, like, huge, widespread appeal, but like I say, it is something I know a lot about, and I think I can spin it to be relatively interesting. Hopefully. Anyway, that's an idea I've got for after Iconic Arms. I might invest a week or two in producing that. Do you know, I'd really like to do some like proper documentaries and actually interview the people who were involved with these games. I think it'd be really nice if I could sort of have like, a few sort of words from the creator of a game in a Retro Ahoy episode. But, obviously it's not always that easy. But I'd definitely like to try my hand at something like that. Like a proper interview. So, if you're a games developer or if you had a hand in, a semi-famous title, feel free to get in touch. Because the ability to actually speak to the people who are behind games would be really, really cool for a Retro Ahoy episode, I think. Anyway, I do go on, and we've hit 20 minutes, so I suppose I shall wrap it up here. Currently in production is the first episode of the first series of Iconic Arms. I mean, technically, the Desert Eagle video was the first video, but that was just a pilot. This is the first episode of the first series, as I consider it. So I'm going to do a run of 6 videos. What are they? In order, they are the AK-47, the Arctic Warfare sniper rifle, the Beretta 92, also known as the M9, the M1 Garand, the classic American rifle, double-barrel shotgun, a generic weapon, but one that still nonetheless crops up in video games, and to polish things off, the MP5, German anti-terror weapon. That's just the first series selection. I know there are others that you would like to see. I know, for instance, the M16 is going to be pretty hotly demanded. The M1911, probably going to be the most requested handgun. I'm aware of these demands, but I didn't want to use all of the really iconic weapons in the first season. So I thought I'd do the AK-47 first, because that is arguably the most iconic arm there is, and I'll do the M16 of the opener for Season 2. Also likely to be included Season 2 is the M1911, but that'll probably be it for American weapons. In addition, there'll probably be another generic Season 2 and another historical weapon, maybe the MP40 next time. And the generic will be something, well, generic. So something like a chain gun, or a rocket launcher, or what else? A chainsaw, maybe. Basically weapons where the specific brand or maker or model doesn't matter. A chainsaw is a chainsaw is a chainsaw, and it chops people's heads off. Anyway, I'm talking about Season 2, I should be focused on Season 1. There's a diverse mix there. You've got one handgun, you've got, a couple of rifles? Yeah, it'll be fine. And if not, well, we can consider it a lesson learned, can't we? I know some of you might be expecting some Weapons of episodes, but I've put those to one side, because I was kind of presented with a choice. I can either do an episode of Weapons of and maybe expect to get 50,000 views, or I could do Iconic Arms, and, well, I'd be honest, I'd be disappointed if Iconic Arms gets less than 100k. The Desert Eagle video did spectacularly well, and I would like to see if I could capitalise on that first episode success with, like I say, a series of 6 to begin with. And if those 6 do well, you can pretty much bank on Season 2. Anyway, it's far too hot in this office, so I might go outside into the garden and do some writing. I think I'm mostly done with this script. I couldn't possibly promise when I'll deliver it though, because I do want to get this first episode right. So I might hold on to it until I'm 100% satisfied. Anyway, until then, farewell.